This is the Balanced Growth Show with Dr. Travis Perry, helping successful business professionals like you achieve balance in their lives.
Welcome to another episode of the Balanced Advisor podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Travis Perry. Today, we're joined by Chris Manske. Chris owns Manske Wealth Management, and he's been praised, published, and quoted in the Wall Street Journal, Reader's Digest, U.S. News and World Report, Forbes, and many more. He's a frequent guest on national podcasts and TV shows. He's also been seen on Yahoo, Finance, Think Advisor, MSN.com, CEO World, and numerous others. Chris's book, The Prepared Advisor, How to Prevent the Next Crisis from Affecting Your Financial Independence, challenges Wall Street's typical approach to crisis investing and has been compared to Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers because both books question a widely accepted concept and ultimately change how readers see the world around them. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is a pleasure. I know we've been thinking about this for a while and getting to know you in the pre-show. I'm just excited to have this conversation and talk about growth and your book and what you're doing for the industry. But first, before we get ahead of ourselves, how'd you get here? How did you decide, I want to be an advisor. I want to own my firm. Talk to us a little about how you ended up here, Chris.
Well, just the quick story. I began in the military. After graduating from the United States Military Academy at WestPoint, I left the Army as a captain to become a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch. And after about 12 years there, I started my own firm. And today, we're 10 people that we've grown to be one of the biggest in Houston, which is the fourth biggest city in the U.S. And we're listed about midway down on the Financial Advisor magazine list of the biggest firms across the country.
Oh, that's fantastic. So did they find you in the military, or did you say, I want out of the Army service? What sparked that?
Well, it was a very close friend of mine who was already at Merrill Lynch, and he had suggested that I, give him a look. And I remember that when I was interviewing, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I'm looking forward to getting a job where I'm going to be outside and maybe traveling. And this might not be the one for me, but in the end, it maybe took me 3 or 4 weeks at the desk there in the Galleria of Merrill Lynch here in Houston. And I knew I was hooked. It was just perfect. It was such an easy mindset to go from the military to being a financial advisor.
Wow, that's really neat. So now you're one of the biggest in Houston. We're going to talk about your growth. We're going to talk about how you've been able to do this. Let's go in and talk just a little bit though about this foundation of balance. Obviously, being in the Army, having that experience, you're kind of owned, right? I mean, to be honest, there's not a ton of balance that I've seen or heard. Obviously, thank you for your service. Both my grandfathers served post-war World War II, and I've had a lot of my family who have also served as kind of weekend warriors in various services. So I understand a little bit what's going on, but not having served myself, I can't say firsthand. But let's talk about balance. How did that differ? Being a financial advisor, maybe even starting in at Merrill, was there much balance out in Merrill? Did you feel like you had control there versus Army versus post Merrill?
Sure. Well, I think that balance, typically when we talk about it, we're talking about being able to cover all of the different parts of your life to the degree that you want to. And that is very hard when you're starting out, I think, in any industry, in any entrepreneurial role. But, when I was starting out at Merrill, I had to forego the traditional view of balance for a while. And it opened up my eyes to a variety of ways to examine balance. And I think today, now that I've been through those hard years of getting the snowball started and then kind of starting over as, hanging out my own shingle, I do have a different, unique concept to how balance works for me. And it's one of the reasons that I find your show so fascinating, is because I'm not alone with that. There's a lot of your guests that they have their views of balance, and I've really enjoyed how you dissect that, and it's part of the conversation I'm most interested into diving into with you.
Awesome. Well, this is a great segue because we're talking about like your experience, how this has shaped you. But I have to ask before we jump into kind of what you think about balance, what does that really look like? My question that comes in my mind is, yes, you're right. In most industries, you get started and there's this idea that you're sort of married to this career. And in order to really make it, you've got to almost give everything up and sacrifice for that. I call this the workaholic trap. And I was there. I was there with Northwestern Mutual. I was there even after I started my new firm, because now I had all these other issues that I was facing that I didn't have when I was a statutory employee there at Northwestern. So for you, let's talk about balance. And with also the thought in the back of your mind, does it really have to be this way? Does it really have to be this way for the industry, this industry? I can't really speak for a lot of others out there, but for this one, I know that there are some that have been able to say, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to figure out a better way. And I was one of them. I was literally kicking against it, screaming and hollering. I still couldn't figure it out. I still needed help. I still needed to kind of be trained and coached. So that said, talk to us about balance. Talk to us what you've been able to figure out through your experience and those early years. Does it really have to be that way?
Sure. Let me answer, does it have to be that way? And then I could talk to, what I think of when I think of balance. I love that question. Does it have to be that way? Because it's a very polite entry point to just how bad is it in our industry. And it can become, I think, a very negative conversation. But I would like to just copy what I've listened on your podcast in the past, that people are very real and authentic. And I'll just start off with, I do believe that we have some work to do in the financial sector when it comes to the hiring practices that, for the most part, it seems to me, are at the brokerages. When we think of the large nationwide brokerages, we think of these scenarios where there's a lot of people that get hired, and it's almost a did you fog the mirror kind of entry obstacle. You get past that, you're in, and they give you a quota. And if you can't meet the quota, then you get fired. And let's see who sticks. It's like throwing the people at the wall and who sticks. We've heard this story a lot, and it does not have to be that way. And the reason that I say it does not have to be that way is because I went through it and I happened to stick. But I also now am on the other side, and I've hired people who they didn't have any financial experience. They came straight from college, and with good training and good methodology and not a single quota, we've grown phenomenally. They've successfully gone from zero AUM to, in one case, I've got an advisor with over 100 million, and it was in 7 years. So, this idea that you just need to sell your soul in order to make it is truly flawed. And it's not so much that it's my opinion, is that, I've lived it. And I think the difference between the two models is leadership. Our industry needs leaders who are willing to put in the time and energy and focus on their people. And when you do that, you get different results than what we're seeing right now with the typical approach to becoming a financial advisor today.
Yeah, I think really what you're talking about is mindset, right? It doesn't have to be the way because they have the right mindset. They've been able to overcome it. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think this industry, and as I examine others, this relates to estate planning. All right. We hear a lot about legacy planning and things. As I meet with estate planning attorneys and others, in this planning area, I find that, the whole world of attorneys and then, even accountants and what they're dealing with as they first come in before they make partner and all these steps that they've got to go through. Goodness, very, very, very similar. So I appreciate your approach. on that. And then, elaborate on balance. What have you come to find is a good balance for you as a business owner?
Sure. Well, for the people who are listening that have a team, and nowadays, I believe the vast majority of advisors, there's some team that they're a part of. They're connected far more than they were a decade ago. So for people that are in that entrepreneurial role, like I am, I think balance has two different important parts. The one part is the professional side, professional entity balance, and then the other is personal human balance. And so with the entity, that means, to me, that means skills and experience. We hear lip service being given to ideas like diversity, but I'm convinced that when you've got a diversity of talent, a diversity of skills, and you complement each other, you're far stronger, you're far more balanced as a company than if you subscribe to the personality test and you're just trying to recreate that one rainmaker over and over again. I really don't think that that is a balanced company, because when crisis strikes or when something unknown arises for the business, when you've got that complementing skill sets, person A is much different from person B, they're very different from person C, and they have different skills, they have different niches and different approaches, different way of viewing life. You are far better off at taking care of the customer. You're far better off at navigating those challenges, turning them into opportunities. Instead of a crisis with chaos, you've got an opportunity with profit. And that comes from that diversity, that balance that I think a lot of institutions tend to not pay as much attention to as they should. We have to have personal balance. Your company needs to have balance too. And so that's the first half. And I think saving the best for last, I do think that the human side is more important, because the entity is not a person, it's made up of people. But each individual person, they've got their own sense of balance as well. And for me, the way that I approach balance is that I think about it in terms of time, tasks, and thankfulness, which happen to all start with T. So 3 T's. So the first one is time. And the way that I approach that is, I think, can I fit all of the things that matter to me into every single minute? I'm going to sleep for 7 seconds. I'm going to go to church for 10 seconds. I'm going to, of course, this is madness. It's impossible to have balance in that minute. Well, if I expand it to an hour, is this enough time? And again, same thing. You can sleep for 10 minutes. You can, be with your friends for 7 minutes, hang around with your family. It's not enough time. But what I find interesting is that when you hit 24 hours, a lot of people start to say, yes, this is the time frame I'm going to use to find balance. And if you extend it to a week, now we're talking about the vast majority of professionals. And I've traveled the country as a trainer for advisors. I was tagged at Merrill Lynch, and I helped thousands of advisors with growing their practice. And it was astonishing to me how often, if you talked about balance, they were thinking of it in terms of a day. Each day they had to have a certain balance to it, or they were thinking of it in terms of a week. And it's not that those are wrong time lanes. It's just, did they pick it on purpose? And if you think about it and you apply your own ideas of what matters and what you need to get done now and what you need to get done later, and you think about those priorities, you might decide there's a different timeline. And so when I did that, I started out with a template that is pretty common called the 7 F's. It's like friends, fun, family, finances, fitness, it goes on. Well, that template, I believe a lot of people, they have a wheel that they plug in all these kind of like generic ideas of, well, if you're doing these things, you're a well-rounded person, and that's the goal. You have to be balanced. But when I thought about the time, and then I started thinking about these tasks, what are the tasks I want to accomplish? Well, there was a point in my life where fatherhood and family and being a good husband, it was less of a drain to me than other times in my life. And those things didn't change on a weekly basis. And so as I've talked with clients and partners to my practice, I've learned that there are some rare people that they choose, a decade to look at balance. And then when the decade is over, they restructure their wheel and they approach their life with a different priority to their tasks. And one gentleman who I really admire, he was very straightforward that he thought balance was a silly concept because he thinks of it as a multi-generational idea, and that here he is, he's working in a way that I would find uncomfortable. He's working that way 6 days a week, and he's done it, for almost 70 years. And he's completely happy. He's got his purpose, those tasks that are important to him. They're very clearly aligned with the way that he's set out his priorities. And his idea is that his grandkids, they'll have more stability and more freedom, and they won't be working in the way that he is. So this idea of balance first to me is about time. And I do try to extend my timeline as far as I can. And sometimes it's hard to do that, but that's the first step. And then the second step is tasks, is I try to move away from the wheel of, hey, everyone should be this way. Here, if you're going to be balanced, here's the 8 things or the 7 things, or, this is what, and instead I just think about really what mattered to me. And I found it to be really hard. I don't know about you, Travis. Have you, as you were writing your book and figuring about achieving balance, understanding which parts of the wheel should even exist, was that a hard thing, or it was really easy for you?
Yeah, so I've been teaching these concepts, coming from that well-rounded wheel perspective, really trying to help myself first, because I was way out of balance. I left Northwestern and started my own business and was working towards CFP. As I was doing that, I'm like, wow, I'm wasting all this time doing this, and the other. And it's really creating some stress at home. And so I got some help. And while I did that, I came to the conclusion that, yeah, everybody has their wheel. Everybody has their 10 areas. But in the book, we boil this down and say, great, here's the 10 areas, or however you want to incorporate them. But instead of me telling you, Chris, what that area is, you tell me. And as I take people through that process, it's like, wow, okay, well, family means my immediate family. I had an advisor the other day who's like, we don't have children yet, so it's my wife and I, and when we hang out with our cats. And, this advisor who's listening, he knows exactly who I'm talking about. But it's interesting that, that's going to depend on who you are, what stage in life, where you're at. What I don't like, and I think you're suggesting the same thing, is when people superimpose their values and their definitions on you. So I have a lot of people kicking back saying, "Well, Travis, I don't believe in balance. Balance is silly. Balance is old hat." I'm like, I get it. That's why you need to understand what is balance for you. And over and over and over again, what I get from advisors and business owners is this: balance is when I'm spending enough time in my top 3 priorities. And you said that when you talk about tasks, you talked about priorities. Even the guy who said balance is silly, it's multi-generational, he talked about priorities. Mm-hmm. So one of the best compliments I got on this book, one of my Amazon reviews, was that this is the best book on priority management I've ever read. I thought, well, that's exactly it. Balance needs to be written as not focus on equilibrium in all areas, but prioritization on the areas that matter most. But again, that's what I've seen when I've done the research with advisors as I've written the book. So I appreciate you bringing that back there. You also mentioned a really good component that I want to kind of go back to and use this as a springboard to another area of discussion, and that's the team approach at work. So diversity of thought, diversity of personality, as you kind of been discussing here, for your team to create a balanced work environment. Let's talk about that. How has having a great team approach allowed your firm to grow in a balanced way?
Well, that's a good question. And I think I would start with what we're doing here is asking people to buy into a culture of honesty and integrity and hard work, but also it's a little bit old fashioned in that we want to work, get our work done, and then go home. And so I think that balance at work for the company is bringing in someone who isn't represented. Like, if we've already got someone who they love hunting and fishing and they kind of fit into that oil and gas environment, like, hand in glove. Well, okay, well, then we probably need someone who they spent some time around doctors because that's going to be different. Or we need somebody who has a natural affinity for, wine and all things grapes, whatever it is that is going to set them apart here on the team. And that, I think, isn't rule one, but it's one of the rules, is that we want to make sure that when you're coming in, you're special, you're unique. We're not trying to get the same person. We don't want a bunch of people that look like me, talk like me, sound like me. We want a lot of different ideas and different opinions. And that means that, because I believe strongly that there is a following for every financial advisor. Whoever you are in this industry, there are people out there that when they sit down with you, they're just going to instinctually enjoy you as a professional. They're meant to work with you. And there's going to be more people that will be attracted to someone who's outgoing and, loves football, because in this country, that's a very common thing. And there'll be less people that are interested in somebody who is more, keeps to themselves and they like knitting. But there are people out there that are like that, and they will be drawn to you, and you have a following. And so when you can see that, know that, and understand that, then each day you come in, it's not I have to be another cog in the wheel. It's, I'm offering value. And then I think the personal balance takes place because, like I said, it was time, tasks, and thankfulness. Well, that thankfulness part is gratitude to the people around me who are putting in their time and energy. And I believe that gratitude, it's not supposed to be a feeling in your heart. It's supposed to be processes at the company that prove the gratitude exists. And the best process is get out of Dodge, go home, be done. Where is the standard? Let's have a clear standard. And once it's met, why go further? Now, does that mean everyone here meets a standard and leaves? No, we've got at least half of the team here that want to exceed the standard on any given day. And, and I love to see that, but it feels different when you're there out of your own personal excitement and motivation than if you're there because you're worried you're going to get fired because of a quota. It's a totally different approach, and it's a much different feel. So that thankfulness, I think, is a piece of the puzzle on the institutional side. On the personal side, I think the thankfulness is in connection to just this great nation. We have a rule of law here. We have an infrastructure here that we could actually be focused on something like balance. That doesn't exist in a lot of places on this planet. I've done a fair amount of traveling, whether it was in the Army or after, and I have a deep gratitude for what is possible in this environment, in this place where we have top-notch electricity and we have property rights, and we have the ability for every citizen that's an adult to go out and vote and make a difference. These things count, and it helps to keep you humble too, because anytime something good happens, you can remember that, it's not all about us. Some of this is part of the structure that we're playing in. So yeah, thankfulness, I think, is a big part of balance as well.
I love that you bring this up because it ties right back into the culture that you're setting for your company, right? The culture of honesty. There's a culture of thankfulness. There is a culture of balance that you've built as a balanced leader in the industry. So I think you're helping to change this mindset. You're helping to change the industry by bringing this up. And you're exactly right. it's absolutely incredible. We live in this great country. It's absolutely incredible that we can even have this conversation, right? Just thinking about it for a second, talking about being mindful and just focusing on what we're doing in this moment. It brings such gratitude to know that I have a microphone, you have a platform, we have following, we have people that we can help and influence. And that's something that we choose 100%. What do you think is your company's biggest issue of trying to scale, even with this culture, the great things that you've talked about, but without losing balance? So you're trying to grow, you're trying to continue to move the needle for the company without losing that sense of balance that you've created. What are some of the, the biggest stressors or thoughts on your mind about that?
Well, I think there's two of them that immediately come to mind. One is accomplishing white glove service, being that top-notch financial concierge that really does handhold the clients. Our mantra as a firm is every client, every month, which means that we are in touch with every client every month. And that requires a bit extra. I'm sure that many people that are listening to this, they would not enjoy approaching their entire client base with the requirement to be in touch with all of them on a monthly basis. And I kind of liken that to, in the motel hotel industry. At hospitality, you've got everything from, the Ritz-Carlton Four Seasons down to, the Hotel 6. And you notice I said down to, but I mean, all of them are rooms, right? They're all rooms. They all have a bed. They're all offering the same thing. The only thing that is different is the people and the service that those people provide. And I think that when we are trying really hard to be a world-class customer service organization that provides the very best experience to every single client every time, that's hard. And it's hard to have balance and accomplish that. So I think that is one of the big challenges is, you might have a win, but the win is over and we now have the new day and we have to win again. And being able to be excited about that and keep the ship going in that same direction without it veering off course toward complacency or toward overstress, where now nobody's happy, that's a very tough path to walk. And then the second challenge to balance and with growth for us is the right people, finding the right people. It's very hard. And that doesn't mean that someone out there has a silver bullet and gosh, it shouldn't be hard. I think it should be hard. I think finding good people, it's difficult and it's not going to change. That's just a challenge. And if someone out there is listening to this thinking, oh, well, finding good people is no problem at all, well, please respond to me afterwards and shoot me your notes, because I'd love to connect with you and hear about your story, because I haven't seen anything that would indicate that there's a quick and easy way to find top-notch, hardworking, honest people with attention to detail and on,
Oh, it's a process for sure. I've got connections to a lot of help in the industry, who have actually been on this podcast. Humans Being Resources is one that I'd recommend, and I have recommended them on this podcast. They have a process, right? It's all about the system, the process of finding and really connecting you with those right fits. But you're right. This is the great rehire on top of everything, because this industry, you need people who are licensed. You need people who understand compliance. You need attention to detail. In order to keep this white glove service, they need to be great service-oriented individuals. And on the other hand, if you're trying to hire advisors, we could go on, right? They need to be comprehensive. They need to be trained. They need to be licensed. They need to not only service, but they need to know how to attract new clients. This is a multifaceted industry. And I think what you mentioned before, having a diversity of thought and personality will greatly enhance. Because if all you have is an army of people who or going out and finding new business and no one knows how to service, you have a service problem. If all you have are service-oriented individuals who are great, but can't find a new client to save their life, like it's not gonna work. So you bring up a really great point here, Chris. Other advisors, as you've seen in the industry in general, what do you think they're struggling with trying to grow their firms while keeping a sense of balance?
I see two main struggles. So one is for people who are new to the industry, and the other is for people who they've been around for a bit. So for people that are new to the industry, the struggle is that they don't have the mentorship, so they don't receive a methodology that is proven to work, that they can use to grow. I think a lot of them, all you have to do is point them in the right direction and they'll kill it. They're ready, they're hungry, and they don't have the leadership that is invested in them to show them, look, this is A, and then B, and then C, and D is inevitable. It's going to happen. Without that methodology, they're frustrated, they're unhappy, and I think that you can solve that with good, proven leadership that is taking a vested interest in those folks. And then the second group, I think that the struggle that folks that they've been around, the struggle that they're having is that they are not thinking hard about tasks in that balance equation. We said there's time, there's tasks, and there's thankfulness. If they really think hard and commit to what their sincere priorities are, then I suspect that their frustrations about growth would start to disappear, because either they want to be growing and they're not giving it the priority it deserves, and they need to put more energy into it. They do need to change their sense of balance so that there's less time in front of the TV and less time doing things that don't grow their practice, and more time doing things that are truly a priority to them. And it's probably not happening, and that's why they're not growing. Or the flip side of that is that it isn't a priority, and they're maybe shouldering somebody else's vision of what success is, and they need to be honest with themselves about their priorities. Look, growing is not a priority. It's not a priority for me, and that's why I'm walking this path, and I shouldn't be unhappy about it. Why do I feel this frustration? Well, it might be because you haven't embraced your truth. And in a lot of Wall Street, that second path of, well, I've got a book and I don't feel like growing, it's belittled, it's really insulted, and you're made to feel less than. And and I think you add that small little comment to a book that just recently came out. This was Fiore. She had a great book that came out about what's happening behind the scenes at one of the big wirehouses. And I mean, there's a lot that they can change. And I do think that advisors that are frustrated about their growth and they've been around the block, they've got a book of business, they need to do a little bit of soul searching.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you. And I think this kind of ties back into our very first thoughts of priorities, balance, what this industry is about. I appreciate balanced leaders like you who are trying to make a difference. You're challenging the status quo for the investor. You're also challenging the industry by, staying put where you're at versus changing and growing and really having balanced leadership. It's very much needed. I really appreciate you on the show today, Chris. If there's one last thing you want to maybe suggest or say or give advice to advisors out there trying to run their company with balance, with growth, what would you tell them?
Well, I would tell them that there is a lot that the financial sector does that should change. This is one small piece. My book, The Prepared Investor, that Travis had mentioned at the start of this in my introduction, it specifically talks to this idea that when crisis strikes and the portfolio goes down, well, there's just nothing you can do about it. You just have to stay the course and weather the storm. Don't worry, it'll come back someday. And this is not the full story. That has so many flaws in it, because there are things that you can do to prepare your clients and prepare your business for the next major downturn. Now that we're in one, I would really guide anyone listening to check out my book, The Prepared Investor, and be looking for my next one, because it's called The Magicians of Money, and talks to other things that Wall Street does that is a little bit deceptive. There's an illusion involved, and they're tricking us, and there's really specific reasons why. But other than that, I wouldn't have anything else to add except a big thank you, Travis, because I've really enjoyed this talk.
Oh, it's been great. You're well prepared, you're well spoken, and I do believe advisors really going to gain some value listening to this. If you've liked our conversation, you've been a fly on the wall, subscribe, share, like, give us some comments, let us know how we're doing. And we'll have the show links and everything in the post, but reach out to Chris if you want to continue this conversation with him. If you want a copy of his book, obviously we'll have those links in there as well. Definitely do that. I will. And I think this is something that, I have a lot of advisors asking me to do some client appreciation events, and they've been talking a lot about the market lately and how do we help them. And I help on the balance side, with the stress management, with their time. But the thing that I'm hearing a lot is what you're saying, Chris, is just kind of hold on and it'll be okay. And so I love that you're challenging this notion and want to get to know more about it. So thank you again. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for listening, everyone. We wouldn't be able to be one of the top 20 advisor podcasts out there if it wasn't for you. So thank you for your listenership, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you again, Chris. And remember, live life on purpose.